We are live.
Well, here we are.
Here we are, another Thursday night.
Another Thursday night. Excellent.
So, Dr. Scott Wright, how are you this evening?
I'm doing really well. It's beautiful weather here in Austin, Texas, and I'm enjoying the change into fall. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I love fall.
Oh yeah, me too.
So, as students are joining us, please type in the comments, say hello, tell us your name, tell us where you're watching from. We want to hear from you.
Absolutely, we do.
Oh, I see Melina. I talked to Melina earlier today.
Nice. Hey, Melina. Good. Yeah, we this is number 4.
This is number 4. Yeah. It's a 7-week series, which seems a little odd because it's 6 personal traits, but
we have to have a wrap up at the end. Right, exactly. Melina.
Melina says I wouldn't mind Texas fall over Michigan fall.
Yeah,
theirs came a little later than ours. Someone from South Florida.
There you go. Just finished physics lab. Oh, so you must be exhausted.
Thanks for making time for us. Muhammad from Minnesota.
No, that's Minnesota. That's Minnesota.
All right. Well, as more people are joining us, please feel free to type in knee, pronounced like knee. I love the pronunciation guide. Thank you. You're from Chicago, the Windy City.
The Windy City. Yep. It's been super windy here today. It's been crazy. So
yeah, well, you're probably getting some of the peripherals of Seda, right?
Maybe. I don't. I think it was more a blue northern that kind of blew through earlier in the week, and it's just the remnants of that sort of blowing through because it's coming from the north. So I don't know.
Gotcha. Anyway. So not necessarily related.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, we could talk weather all night, but we should probably talk some pre-med stuff.
I think so.
So I'm going to do introduction. I think a lot of you have been here other weeks, but just for anyone who's starting in the middle, which is totally fine. I'm Rachel Grubbs. I am one of the co-founders of MAPT along with Dr. Ryan Gray. And this gentleman here, I'll put him on spotlight, is
here I am.
Dr. James Scott Wright. And Scott is the former executive director of TMD SAS, so the Med and Dental Application Service in Texas. He was also director of admissions at UT Southwestern Med, and he was an undergraduate dean at UT Dallas. So this is someone who's got a lot of experience helping pre-meds. And tonight he's going to share some stuff with you that you often don't hear. A lot of pre-meds get fixated on numbers, and the numbers do matter. We're not pretending they don't, but you guys already know a lot about that. And what we want to make sure you also know is that there are qualities, there are attributes that med schools want to see in their applicants. And probably a lot of you have them, but you might need to reflect on them a little. And maybe some of them need a little development. So that's what this series is about developing that. And I'll let Scott take over from here, but I will see you guys again towards the end. We're going to do some question and answer. We're going to try to keep you engaged a little bit in the chat. So Scott might ask some questions and we'll see what answer you type in. And then at the end or at any point, ask questions. And we may or may not stop to answer them throughout, but we'll definitely deal with all the questions at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome everyone. And thank you, Rachel, for that very pleasant and probably way too kind introduction for me. But I'm so happy as always to be here with you guys and to experience this together with you. It's one of the highlights of my week. Thursday nights is, and so I'm pleased to be here. And I hope that the stuff that we're going to talk about has been in the past several weeks and will continue to be helpful to you in your pre-med journey. As Rachel said, it is really about personal qualities as opposed to the numbers, as opposed to academic or cognitive issues. It's really about personal traits that medical schools, the Association of American Medical Colleges have really developed this notion of what needs to be present in the eyes and in the minds of and the behaviors of students that are entering into medical school. These are indicative, of course, of traits that would be important in the practice of medicine, and so developing these early on, I think, can be healthy, as you probably have experienced and may see again tonight, healthy as individuals in general society, but certainly helpful as physicians and as medical students as you go through the process of learning how to be a clinician. And so I want you to pay attention and to reflect on these things, and hopefully we'll be able to enjoy this together and to learn a few things as we go along. So as I said, the AAMC has developed a list of what they call pre-professional competencies. These are what they expect to see from incoming medical students. And so these are the things that you should be thinking about now and developing now as a resource for what you will be expected to display in medical school. And these we've talked about over the course of the last 3 weeks, and we will today. These 9 qualities: service orientation, social skills, cultural competence, teamwork, oral communication, ethical responsibility to yourself and also to others, reliability and dependability, resilience and adaptability, and the capacity for improvement. And any particular experience that you have, whether it's in a clinical setting, such as volunteering at a hospital, or whether it's a work experience like scribing, or whether it's an experience at school or in a club or organization that you're in at your institution, any experience could illustrate or display some level of competence in one or many of these particular attributes or competencies. And so what we want to do, and so what I have done is try to boil this down into 6 easily understandable traits that medical schools want to see. And so in the first week, we talked about altruism and the importance of focusing on others and being others-centered. Now, clearly, this is an attribute that we would like to see in our physicians and in caregivers in general. The second week, we talked about humility and the importance of sort of not overinflating who we are as individuals and our abilities, but instead being modest and humble in terms of how we approach others. Last week, we talked about self-awareness and the importance of knowing sort of our strengths, but also our weaknesses, how we approach others emotionally and intellectually, and being aware of what we do and how it affects other people, how our behaviors are perceived by others. Tonight, we're going to talk about autonomy and what autonomy means in general, and then some specific behaviors related to autonomy that you can think about, and how those correlate with these 9 pre-professional competencies that the AAMC has identified. So in order to do that, let's first jump in and define what do we mean by autonomy. This is one of those words that I think many of us can use in a sentence. We sort of know what it means, but it's helpful to sort of define it in a way that's going to help us move forward. So autonomy can be defined as the ability to regulate your behavior and to select and guide your decisions and actions in order to achieve meaningful personal goals, but without undue influence from external influencers, undue control from external influencers. And so if we break that down, we can see that there's really 4 pieces to that definition. The first piece is that it's about behavior regulation. So I'm going to regulate my actions in order to accomplish something. The second piece is that that this regulation of behavior is going to guide my decision process, the process I go through to make meaningful decisions in my daily life. The third part is that all of this leads to goal achievement, that I'm going to set particular personal goals that are going to be important in my life and potentially in the life of someone else, particularly as caregivers. And then finally, that there's a part of this that's all about influence management. That how am I going to be influenced in this decision-making process? How am I going to do that? Am I going to be completely influenced by external sources, or am I going to regulate external sources and sources within me that will help me to sort of regulate my behavior and make decisions with regard to these personal goals that I've set? So this word autonomy comes from Greek, from the Greek language, ancient Greek, and it essentially means self-rule. So ruling myself, as opposed to someone else ruling over me. And this is a very important topic that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes a little bit more. But that's the key to this, the idea of self-rule. And we're going to talk further also about this concept that this is a very Western this is a very Western construct. It comes from the sort of philosophical and the political philosophy of Western society. And we're going to talk about that in terms of how that can sometimes conflict with other cultures in this multicultural society that we live in. But nonetheless, the foundation of American society is this Western concept of individualism and of self-rule. Now, I've got a couple of interesting pop culture examples of this, one of which I'm a big fan of Star Trek. And I don't know if you guys are fans of Star Trek, but there is a group in the Star Trek Next Generation series that are called the Borg, and this photograph on the left there is a picture of one of the members of the Borg, who are a constant threat to the United Federation of Planets, which the Star Trek characters belong to. And unlike other alien races that the Star Trek crew encounters, the Borg are made up of a variety of different species, but all of whom have been assimilated into this sort of collective mind. And as it happens, once they're assimilated into this collective mind, they are deprived of individuality. They're deprived of any sort of personality or any autonomy at all, any independence at all. And this is the battle between the independence, the autonomy of the characters from the Starship Enterprise in the United Federation of Planets, and this collective called the Borg. And so this is an ongoing theme in the contact between the Star Trek crew and this collective called the Borg. The second example I use, some of you may be familiar with, is the game Assassin's Creed, very popular video game. And the main conflict in is between a group called the Templars and the Assassins. And their disagreement in this game is all about autonomy. This is the focus of this game, is about autonomy. The Templars, on one hand, believe that sort of social peace and prosperity can only be achieved if ordinary people are ruled by powerful authorities and who make decisions for them. The assassins, on the other hand, believe that people must be free to make their own decisions, including, for example, their own mistakes. And that in the long run, that freedom, that autonomy is going to bring about greater prosperity in society, greater harmony amongst people, etc. So while the Templars are what we could call paternalistic, in other words, they feel like you rule over individuals to affect the betterment of society, the assassins, on the other hand, espouse this idea of autonomy or independence. So the whole game is really about this issue of autonomy. I don't know how many of you are fans of or play Assassin's Creed, but think about that the next time you do, if you do, and think about the parts of the game and how it really is all about this issue of personal individuality and personal freedom. So those are a couple of examples in pop culture of this. Now, what are a few attributes of autonomy that we can really focus in on and talk about? One of which on the next slide we see is the issue. These attributes of autonomy is autonomy is all about independence. It is about being independent thinker, independent actor. Behavior is independent, and this goes back to the idea in our definition of independence from undue influence of external forces. So I'm going to make decisions based on whatever pieces of the puzzle I put together. I'm going to make decisions based on those influences, whether they're influences from externally, family, friends, faculty, advisors, whatever, or am I going to make decisions based on my own internal decision-making process? Now, most of us, of course, it's a mixture of all of those things but ultimately the choices we make in terms of what we're going to allow to influence us, we make those choices, and therefore we are acting independently. Second attribute is that of self-sufficiency emotionally. So there's a concept in psychology called codependency. And codependency is all about being unduly affected by and connected to another individual emotionally, such that you're not making decisions on your own, or that you're making decisions based on your connection to that individual. So what we're talking about here really is sufficiency in and of myself emotionally, that my emotional well-being is not dependent on an external source. It's not dependent on someone else or a group of people. And again, all these are ideals, and they don't, we typically have a mixture of these things in our lives. The third attribute that we can identify is the ability that an autonomous person has the ability to take the initiative. If you are constantly sitting back and waiting for someone else to tell you what to do, this is not acting in an autonomous way. Constantly, I remember we had an applicant in the Texas system some years ago, and this particular applicant called in to the application service. I think we calculated that over the period of the application process, and we would track these things, I think this particular applicant called in some 37 different times. She could not, and she would have questions like, I don't know what to put in this answer to this question. How do you think I should put this? And she would ask questions like that. And she even got to the point where she called in and asked, what did we think that she should wear to her interview? And we had real concerns about that because it appeared that this young lady could not make a decision on her own. She had no ability to take the initiative. We expressed that concern to the medical schools. She indeed did get accepted and began at one of the medical schools in Texas. However, she only made it a year and a half before she dropped out. And it was mainly due to, my understanding was, her inability to make any independent decisions, to take the initiative to do anything on her own. This was a fatal, in her case, a fatal character flaw. So the ability to take the initiative. Now, you can see very clearly how this connects to clinical care for a physician. Physicians are the team leader of the healthcare team. It is the physician that has to take the initiative in the care. Now, do we listen to other people like nurse practitioners or PAs or respiratory therapists or other practitioners, nurses, etc.? Absolutely, we do. But ultimately, it is the physician that takes the initiative to plan out the care of the patient. And finally, autonomy, an attribute of autonomy, is the ability to make informed decisions, the ability to make informed decisions. We inform ourselves, as I was saying earlier, we inform ourselves through external sources, whether it's reading or talking to experts in the field, et cetera, whatever we're dealing with. And then we are able to make a decision based on that input that we get and our own calculated information, our own intuition, our own wisdom, our knowledge, etc. We make informed decisions, and we're able to do that because we act autonomously. Now, there are a few behaviors that are related to these attributes, and these are, I've chosen some that really are all about where you are now in your journey. So related behaviors, if you're an autonomous person, here's a few things that you might be doing or have done. One of which is maybe you've had a job, a part-time job, maybe a full-time job, and that you took the initiative to go and get the job. In your job, you have to get yourself up in the morning, you go to work, you do your job, whatever that is, you go home, you get your paycheck, you decide what you're going to do with that money. Some of you may be thinking, well, I don't have to decide a whole lot because it's spread out all over everything, and these affect that affects what discretionary funds I have. Another related behavior, maybe you've lived away from family, either on campus or off campus. You've lived independently. That doesn't mean necessarily that you live alone, but it does mean that you've lived outside of the core unit from which you've been raised. Because what we know about children in the home, in the family unit, is that they're not autonomous. There's parental guidance, parental influence that is constant throughout. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm 56 years old. My father is 85. My mother is 83. And I am not completely autonomous from them in their minds. I have many times had phone calls from my dad trying to exert what I considered to be undue influence. And I had to make the decision, no, we're not going to. And I actually had to come to a point where I had to draw some boundaries and had to say, Dad, this is inappropriate. There's a boundary here. I'm an adult. I don't need to know, et cetera. You get the point. Thirdly, can you describe a situation where you made a decision different from your family or your friends? Can you describe a situation where you went down a different path, where you listened to a different voice and went in a different direction? This is important for us to sort of establish in our mind these milestones that say, okay, I'm establishing independence. And it's not necessarily because you did it just to be independent, but you did it because of other influences in your life. Maybe it was some other path that you wanted to take. I talked to a young lady the other day who's interested in pre-med, but maybe not to a degree that would lead her into medicine. She had no experience in the healthcare field. She's about to finish her degree in biochemistry. And I asked her, I said, well, let's talk about that. What if you didn't go into medicine? What would you do? And she said, she's very involved in research. And I said, have you thought about, research as a career choice, going in, into a PhD route, for example, in biochemistry? So we talked about that for a little while. And I said, and she said, well, I don't know how my parents would react to that. And so we talked a little bit about that, a little bit more about that. And she said, well, now that I think about it, they just want me to be successful, and they want me to, they're all about reputation, and the reputation of the field that I might be going into. So we talked generally about that, and about the differences between of going into a various field. And so we decided she would examine that. But she did say, on the other hand, well, it probably won't be too bad, because my parents are really hacked off at my sister because she went into art. And so it was really it was kind of turned out to be a funny conversation. But it illustrated to me this idea of taking the initiative to do something new or different, to do something hasn't been done in your family before, to maybe do something different from your friends. Maybe your friends are doing one thing or going one place, and you choose to do something different. You choose to go a different path and sort of establish and relate to them in an independent fashion. So that gives us some ideas of really what we're talking about, and I like the idea of autonomy. As I said, it's a very important aspect of modern American society, and really of Western society in general, and certainly of Western medicine. And those of you that have any experience with other cultures will see how other cultures often are not to the same level of this kind of autonomy or this kind of independence, particularly when it comes to family, where there can be some pretty significant differences. But our whole system of laws, our whole system of informed consent in the healthcare setting is based on this idea of the individual, and not of the collective, not of the family or of the collective, but of the individual. So let's relate this then to some of these core competencies of the AAMC, and see which ones really are affected by that. The first one that I really thought about, and I'm going to ask you what you think about some of these. The first one that I really thought about was that of reliability and dependability. In other words, we're consistently fulfilling obligations that we have in a timely way and in a satisfactory way. And it is also about us taking personal responsibility for our actions and for what we do and how we perform. So you can easily see how this really is centered on you as an autonomous individual. You are going to be the one that fulfills your own obligations. And I will say this about medical school, that when it comes to clinical medicine in medical school, when it comes to the clinics and the third year rotations and the fourth year electives and things like that in the clinical setting of medical school, showing up is half of it. It is just being there, and you'd be surprised how often faculty will comment about the idea of just getting there on time and being there when it's time for you to be there. So teamwork, is a very good, if we could move forward, somebody mentioned teamwork let's go 2 slides. One more slide. Teamwork is another excellent one that I also identified. Great work, Nee. Teamwork is about working collaboratively with others on shared goals. Now, in order to have shared goals, it means that we have individual goals that are shared. It means that we provide information and knowledge to others, and that we are accepting of feedback, and we provide feedback to others. In order to provide feedback to someone else about their behavior, for example, or their own knowledge, we have to have our own sense of understanding in order to provide that feedback. And we recognize that sometimes in a teamwork situation, these individual goals that we have, these independent or autonomous goals that we have to take a back seat to goals of the team itself. But we recognize that that's a part of the process. That's a part of the learning process, etc. If we go back one slide, is another one that I think somebody else mentioned, and that is the other direction. Right there, good. Is the capacity for improvement. Now, as I said from the very beginning in the definition of autonomy, we said that this was all about achieving meaningful personal goals. That this is the regulation of behavior and decision-making guidance that leads us to achieve or enhance personal goals without the undue influence of others. And so this is related to this idea of capacity for improvement. The capacity for improvement is vital in medicine. Medicine is a lifelong learning process. You never stop learning. You never stop setting goals. You never stop improving, because medicine is going to run you by. The pace at which medicine is changing in the 21st century is unbelievable. Whether it's technology or new therapeutics, whether they're pharmaceutical or surgical, etc., it's vastly moving in a fast direction. And so what I would say to you is this idea that we set internal goals, and that we accept goals from external sources, and we make decisions independently to accept those goals is crucial. And we have to accept feedback to do those, so to reach those goals, and we respond accordingly. The last one that I thought about was the one that I really wanted to talk a little bit was 2 slides advanced. There you go, is cultural competence. And this is where we really have to think about the multicultural society that we live in. This multicultural society that we live in is broad, particularly when it comes to Eastern cultures. There can be a real conflict often between the way that Eastern cultures respect the family unit as sometimes more important than the individual. And again, what this comes up, it's not unusual for this to come up in a clinical setting. I remember a clinical case that we had in the ethics course that I helped facilitate at UT Southwestern, where we had a Asian family, and the mother of the Asian family did not speak any English, and had to be translated. There had to be a translation for the mother, and the daughter was doing the translating. And it turned out that the mother had a chronic a disease that was going to take her life, and it was very serious. And the daughter did not want the mother to know about this disease. And so this was a problem because, as I said before, our system of laws and our system of ethics related to the practice of medicine are built around informed consent of the individual, of the patient. So what had to happen was, in this particular case, there had to be an external translator instead of the daughter translating for the mother, because we were unclear if the daughter was actually translating it appropriately. So there was a lot of cultural issues here related to that particular case. So we have to take those into consideration. We have to demonstrate that we are understanding of these socio cultural factors and how they affect the interactions that we have with patients, with other caregivers, et cetera, and move forward appropriately, but in a way that it shows that we appreciate the differences and that we appreciate the benefits of a diverse society in a diverse learning environment, et cetera. I have a couple of quotes here that I wanted to share with you that I think really illustrate in some really interesting ways this issue of autonomy. The first is from Nicholas Tharcher, who's a psychologist and author, and he says, "The essence of independence or autonomy has been to think and act according to standards from within and not without, to follow your own path and not that of the crowd." So his conception as a psychologist of independence is that we think and that we act according to our own internal system of standards. Now, obviously, that system of standards is affected by external influences, but that we ultimately make the decision how we're going to allow those external influencers to help direct us. The second quote here is from one of my favorite singers who was back from the 60s and 70s and died a tragic early death, a Jamaican songwriter and singer, Bob Marley. And he said, "Emancipate yourselves from what he called mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. We free our own minds by the decisions that we make." Emancipate, I love this quote, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." That's Bob Marley. Now, our painting for tonight, it comes from the biblical narrative. This is the famous painting of the creation of Adam by Michelangelo. Incredibly famous Sistine Chapel painting. And it is of God on the left, on the right, touching the hand in creation of Adam, in the creation of Adam. And the point here is that in the Christian narrative, that God gives to Adam the autonomy, or what is often in biblical literature called free will. In other words, he offers to Adam the ability to make choices and to be independent and act in an autonomous way. So this is that picture of autonomy that God not only created in this biblical narrative the person of Adam, but gave him independent thinking, independent thought, independent action, and what he would do with that, we will actually see later as we go along in the next few weeks. So I love this. I love this thing. Super famous painting. I'm hopeful that someday I'm going to get to Rome and actually see it in person. But it's just a wonderful illustration for us tonight of this issue. Obviously, this issue of autonomy in the world of art. So that brings us to the end. I hope that you've got some great questions, and we'll try to answer them. I want to obviously remind you, those of you that are not a part of the Mapped family yet, that we have a variety of things going on at Mapped. Obviously, we have our software solution, which calculates your GPAs for you, and upon which you can reflect activities and these competencies that we've talked about. You can research medical schools and really track your whole pre-med pathway and sort of help you navigate that experience. That you can involve yourself with Mapped through a couple of weeks of a free trial. You don't have to input a credit card or anything. So you get a couple of weeks to sort of play around with it and see what you think and see if you want to sign up for it. And even those of you who do, I hope you have had a good experience so far. Just to remind you also that at Mapped, we have one-on-one advising and essay feedback, interview prep stuff you can see on our website at mapped.com/services, where we have the ability to help you out in terms of whether it's a one-time shot or a long-time experience throughout the entire cycle, or just feedback on your essays and stuff like that. You can see the variety of things that we offer there. So look up those things. And so, Rachel, I hope we have some cool questions, some interesting questions.
Right now we have some comments.
Oh, I love comments.
So somebody's got the creation of Adam on their desktop. That's awesome.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Someone else has been to Rome and seen it in person.
I'm so jealous.
So have I, although I was 7. It's a long story
right.
of why I was in Europe at 7.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where you have to wait in line forever, I think, to get to
I don't think I really appreciated it as much as I would now.
Right. No doubt.
So feel free to type in questions or comments, guys, and we'll answer them. We've still got some time here for you. While you guys are formulating those and typing them in, I do just want to remind you, if you opt to do one-on-one advising, the person that you're most likely going to be working with is this guy.
Voila. Hello.
So that's pretty cool. Obviously that's a big investment and we don't expect everyone to do it. It's part of why we try to give as much information for free as possible.
Absolutely.
We don't want anyone to feel like they're missing key data. So there's not extra special information that comes with the advising. It's more about the hand holding and the personalization. But every bit of expertise we have, we're going to try to give you in these kinds of seminars, or our sibling company in Med School HQ has the podcast. Like we try to give you a lot of information at no cost, because that's what we believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, let's take a look here. We've got a question. This is good. Let me put it up here. How can we ensure our future patients are feeling autonomous without eliminating their cultural values, like family orientation? That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's a balancing act. I will assure you that we, the clinicians, in my experience, through the experiences I've had in the medical school environment and in the ethics in medicine courses of which I've participated and facilitated, it's a balancing act, and clinicians will often fall down on one side or the other. The ideal in the ideal world, there'll be a balance there, and that the family will help make the decision. Ultimately, it is the caregiver, the physician, that makes a determination about informing the patient as best he or she can of the situation, and then the patient makes the decision. Now, the patient may make the decision to involve their family and to have their family be a part of that decision-making process. But I do think it's important for the caregiver to make sure that he or she takes as much steps as possible to make sure that the patient is informed of the decision that needs to be made, and then their choice will be how do they make that decision, whether they make it in and of themselves or they involve others around them. whether it's family or friends or whatever. So it is often a balancing act for certain. And you'll learn more about that in medical school. I mean, you'll go through a lot of this in terms of clinical medicine and in real world medicine. It's, we can think theoretically about this, but on the ground in a one-on-one situation with the patient or the family, et cetera, it often gets muddled and things don't fall exactly in terms of how we would love to see it in a perfect world.
Here's another one. What is the best way to articulate these traits? Activities, personal statement, secondaries?
Yeah, I think there is there are a variety of ways in which these can be evidenced. Obviously, through activities. These will come out in your list of activities and descriptions. Now, you're not going to say, in your activity description, because I am an autonomous individual, I did blah, 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 blah. But it's going to be clear. Often it's more clear when it's the negative as opposed to the positive of the trait. For example, I remember one year we had an applicant to medical school in Dallas who had never left Dallas in their entire life. They grew up in Dallas. They went to high school in Dallas. They went to college in Dallas. They wanted to go to medical school in Dallas. They had never traveled anywhere. So there was concerns on the admissions committee that this individual may not be best suited to be in Dallas, that they may need to be outside of the city and experience the world around them in different ways. We ultimately did not enroll that student at medical school. I think that wasn't the only issue with the application, but that was one of the big discussion points at the admissions committee meeting. These traits will also come out in interview setting, where you can sort of more fluidly explain kind of things that you've learned from your experiences and how this has affected you, et cetera. So it comes out in sort of a variety of different ways. Most of them are not sort of overt to say, to use that, I guess that term might be good, but are more sort of behind the scenes and sort of create the whole picture, as it were.
Yep. All right. So here's a meaty one. I don't know if we can totally get into this or if we have to defer to med schools, but it's a good one. So Abby asks, for teenage patients,
Right.
To what extent do pediatricians take the child's autonomy over their parents?
Well, that's a good question. And legally, 18 is the key. 18 years old marks the departure from paternalistic actions to autonomous actions. Now, there are some parts of that are different in some states as opposed to others. State law will dictate that. But in most states, once you turn 18, then I have a 19-year-old son, and when he turned 18, we had to have documentation that said that we were allowed to be involved in his life or help him make decisions. He happens to be a special needs guy, and so we had to legally have documentation because he's 18. He is able to make decisions. He's not severely handicapped, but he does need certain help that is probably a little bit more extensive than what a typical 19-year-old might need. And so this is, a lot of these things are dictated by law. Not that we always point to the law and say, well, I'm going to do whatever the law says. Sometimes the law is not very ethical or moral in its stance, but it is the law indeed. And so, but it does show that there is sometimes conflict between what we might ethically do as or what you might ethically do as a physician or as a caregiver. So I think it's a good question, and it's something that I'm sure pediatricians deal with constantly when it comes to children that get close to the age of 18 and where that point of departure is.
Yeah, All right, here's another.
Yeah,
How can we be autonomous without seeming overly
great
confident to
one.
others? I often struggle with thinking about how others perceive me.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think you might want to read. My blog this week was about, interestingly enough, confidence, and on the map.com/blog, you can see my blog entries over the course of the last several months and stuff. And this week's was about confidence, and I think there is again, I'm a huge advocate for balance in all aspects of our lives. And so what we're talking about really is my feeling is that if the questioner says, I often struggle with thinking about how others perceive me, and this issue of the conflict between confidence, or what we might call in the context of this question, arrogance, and not confidence, or what you say it is being overly confident. And so what I would say is this is a chief opportunity to take on some external influence. So for example, if you as an individual have been told by friends or family members before, man, you seem so arrogant, or why are you so in my face about this, or whatever, then that's maybe something that you need to listen to and to examine in and of yourself. Is this what am I doing to come across this way, and how can I change that perception of others, change my behavior to not come across that way? On the other hand, if you're not being told that, if you haven't had that input, then you need to sort of let that go. Then you may be in your mind thinking, oh, I'm overly confident, or I'm coming across as arrogant. But if nobody's giving you that feedback, then that's something you're creating from within yourself. This is a very common trait of applicants, particularly when it comes to the application and interview cycle. They fear coming across as overly confident or arrogant. In my experience in the application process, particularly in the interview process, is that this is very rare. It is not very often that applicants come across as arrogant. I think often they come across as not as confident as they should be. Rachel, you're nodding your head with that. You probably had
I made the
experience
camera
with that.
bigger. I was giving you all the gotta chime in clues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see this a lot. I mean, I've been helping pre-meds for almost 20 years now. And I think, you guys work so hard. I mean, I'm generalizing, but you're all bright and you're all hard workers, and it's so competitive. And sometimes you could kind of get down about it. It can be hard to stay positive. And what I would say in terms of like confidence versus overly confident, or confidence versus arrogance, is if what you're doing is putting faith in yourself, you're putting your blinders on, you're not looking left or right, and you're just going after what you want, then you are confident and you are fine.
Yeah.
If you find yourself comparing to others and consistently putting yourself above others, then you might have crossed the line into arrogance.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good way to do a self-check. I mean, there is this thing about humans, like if you survey 100 people about whatever skill they're doing and ask them how they are from below average, average, above average, excellent, everybody thinks they're above average, right? Like
Right.
we do lie to ourselves a little bit just to stay sane. And I think that's okay. Like that's a coping mechanism. But there's a big difference between, my grandma got sick and I wanted to be like the doctor who was so kind to her in her final years. That strikes me as confident, versus I didn't like the way the doctor treated my grandma and he wasn't any good. And like, you don't know what that doctor was going through. You don't know what fights he had behind the scenes to try to get her better care despite insurance limitations. So if you're making those assumptions about someone else and comparing yourself to them without their training and years of experience. And I'm not saying the question asker is doing this. I'm just giving some examples here. Like if you're doing that in an interview or in a personal statement, I'm going to read it as arrogant. But if you're just saying, I was inspired by, I want to be like, I want to pay forward, I think medicine is changing and I want to be a part of how we make it better, those are all things that just strike me as confident, not arrogant.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Uh,
Completely agree with that.
let's
Do we have
see.
time for one more?
I think so. We've got a mapped one too, but I usually try to save those for the end and keep it kind of focused on the topic at hand. Let's see. So, would it be irrelevant to speak about an event from childhood? For example, oh, that's funny. I just gave one. For example, I asked my parents to move to another country and live with my grandparents when I was 9 because I felt my dreams weren't where I grew up. Man, you got your parents to move. That is badass.
Wow, that is wow. I don't think that's irrelevant at all. I think that, I think pointing back to that and saying, because this, particularly in this kind of like, this is a huge life event for anybody, particularly for a family or an individual like this to move to an entirely different country because of the, because it really is connected to this dream, I'm assuming, of wanting to become a doctor. And so I don't think that's bad at all. I mean, I think it's part of your story and part of the application process, particularly in the personal statement and in other areas as well, is telling your story and relating it back to. So this is clearly an evidence in my mind of sort of autonomous thinking, even as a 9-year-old. And boy, you're convincing your family to move to a different country. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So we'll wrap up with the map question.
Yeah.
We got a minute to go. So Melina asks, is there an estimated time of arrival for storage/character count for essays on Mapped? And yes. So for those of you who aren't currently Mapped users, we've been focusing on helping pre-meds track and organize the data first. Right now, what we're working on, so we're still developing, we're still adding features. So at the price that people are already paying, we're putting more and more good stuff in there. And right now what we're developing is a feedback algorithm. So this is going to be a big query where we can look at parameters in your file and then give you some feedback. So this, to me, the thing we're working on right now is where Mapped starts to give you enormous value because you're getting expertise from people like Dr. Scott Wright here, like myself, like Dr. Ryan Gray. And the kind of advice we'd give in a one-on-one, you're going to be getting it for the monthly or yearly subscription fee. So it won't be one-on-one, but it'll be based on the queries that we're making. So, because, there are some things that happen to everyone the same. A C- on a prereq, the answer is always you got to retake. A C on a prereq is a question mark. But so we can kind of give those things to students. So that's what we're working on now, and it's going to probably take us through, I think, about Thanksgiving. And then in December, we're going to work on some guest access because we want to make sure that if students want to share with advisors, they can, like their school advisors. And then by January, to the question being asked here, we should have some application simulators so that as people go into the new year and start to really work on those personal statements in earnest, they can be storing them in Mapped with character counts. So people who are using Mapped will have a way to look at the data they've already tracked. One of the things we ask you to do in Mapped is reflect on your activities and journals, your events, right? On these kinds of conversations we're having tonight. So hopefully everyone has lots of stuff journaled already, and then they could go pour that over and start turning it into draft essays that'll be saved right in your Map file. So that's all coming in the next couple of months. Map's just going to get better and better.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I think
we've come to the end of another one. Yeah.
So we've got a few more weeks left. This goes until the week before Thanksgiving. So hopefully we will see you guys in week 5, a week from tonight. And thank you as always for participating.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to see you guys, and cheers to you, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, everyone.